The marriage contract sat on the wooden table between two fathers who would not look each other in the eye. And Callum Strickland knew his life was about to end before it had truly begun. He stood at the back of his family's farmhouse parlor, watching his father's weathered hands tremble as they held the quill. Across from him sat warchief Graken of the Ironridge clan, a massive orc whose scarred green arms were crossed over his chest, his expression carved from stone. Between them, Callum's mother dabbed at her eyes with her apron, while an orc woman who must have been the bride's mother sat rigid and silent, her tusks gleaming in the lamplight. The border war had ended 3 months ago with a treaty no one wanted. 20 years of bloodshed, of raids and counter-raids, of fields burned and families destroyed, all culminating in this, a peace sealed by forced marriages between the two peoples. 5 human men would marry orc women. 5 orc men would marry human women. Callum had drawn the short straw, though in truth there had been no straws at all. His father had volunteered him the moment the provincial governor had ridden through their valley requesting candidates. "It is for the good of the valley," his father had said, not meeting his eyes. "For peace." Peace. The word tasted like ash in Callum's mouth. He was 23 years old, a farmer's son who had spent the war years learning to coax life from the soil while his older brothers marched off to fight. 2 of them had never come back. The third, Marcus, had returned with 1 arm and nightmares that made him scream in the darkness. Marcus had looked at Callum with hollow eyes when their father announced the arrangement. "Better you than me," Marcus had whispered. "I have already given enough." Now Callum watched as his father signed the contract, the scratch of quill on parchment impossibly loud. Warchief Graken took the quill next, his movements deliberate and careful despite his size. When both signatures marked the page, the orc woman who had accompanied them, some sort of clan elder or priestess, lifted a ceremonial blade and pricked first the warchief's thumb, then Callum's father's. Their blood mingled on the contract, sealing it in the old way. "It is done," the priestess said, her voice surprisingly gentle. "The wedding will take place in 3 days' time as the treaty demands. Neutral ground, the old crossroads where the river bends." Callum's father finally looked up, his face gray. "And my son will be treated well." Warchief Graken's jaw tightened. "She is my daughter, my youngest child, my only remaining daughter." His accent was thick, but his words were clear, each one weighted with meaning. "You think this is easy for me, to give her to a human. But the treaty demands it, and I will not let more of my people die for pride." The answer hung in the air, not quite reassurance, but not quite threat either. Callum's mother let out a small sob. "Can I at least know her name?" Callum heard himself ask. His voice sounded distant to his own ears. The warchief's eyes shifted to him for the first time, dark and measuring. "Worgana. Her name is Worgana." "Worgana," Callum repeated. He tried to imagine the face that went with the name and came up blank. He had seen orcs before, of course across battlefields when he had been pressed into militia service during the war's final year, across trade negotiations in tense village squares. But he had never spoken to one, had never looked one in the eye as anything other than an enemy. And will she? Callum struggled to find the right words. "Does she want this?" The silence that followed his question was answer enough. The orc mother's shoulders stiffened. The warchief's expression darkened. "Does my son want this?" Callum's father shot back, and there was anger in his voice, the first emotion other than resignation Callum had heard from him in months. "We do what we must. All of us." The meeting ended shortly after. The orcs departed into the autumn night, and Callum's family sat in the parlor in silence. His mother cried quietly. His father stared at the fire. Marcus poured himself whiskey with his remaining hand and did not offer to share. "I'm sorry," his father said finally, "but it had to be someone. And you are young, and you are whole, and you have no children to leave behind. The other families in the valley, they have less. They have suffered more. I could not ask them." "So you asked me without asking me," Callum said. The anger that had been building in his chest for 3 months finally broke through. "You sold me like a sack of grain." "I sold all of us a future," his father said, and there was steel beneath the weariness in his voice. "You are too young to remember what it was like before the war. There was trade. There was peace. Not perfect, but better than this. If these marriages can bring that back, then I am the price," Callum finished. He stood, suddenly unable to bear the cramped parlor any longer. "I am going to check on the horses." No one stopped him as he walked out into the cold night air. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. His mother washed and mended his best clothes, the ones he had worn to his brother's funeral. Village women brought small gifts, their faces pinched with pity and something else relief, that it was not their sons being sacrificed to the peace. The village priest came to offer hollow blessings and talk about duty and the greater good until Callum excused himself to muck out the stables. Marcus found him there on the evening before the wedding. "You are angry," his brother said. "It was not a question. Would you not be?" Callum drove the pitchfork into the hay with more force than necessary. "I am always angry." Marcus sat down on a barrel, his empty sleeve pinned neatly at the shoulder. "But I learned in the war that anger does not change what is. It only makes the doing harder. Did you ever kill any of them?" Callum asked. "The orcs?" "Yes." Marcus's voice was flat. "Does it matter? I do not know. Maybe she lost brothers too. Maybe her family hates me as much as we should hate them." "Do we?" Marcus asked. "Hate them?" Callum stopped working. "I do not know," he admitted. "I know I am supposed to. But mostly I just feel empty." "Then go into this empty," Marcus said. "Do not carry hate when you do not feel it. That is its own kind of lie." He stood, steadying himself against the barrel. "And Callum, if she is as unwilling as you are, perhaps you can at least be unwilling together. There is a kind of companionship in shared misery." It was the closest thing to comfort anyone had offered him. The wedding took place at noon under a sky the color of steel. The crossroads were ancient, marked by standing stones that predated both human and orc settlements in the valley. Neutral ground, in truth, neither side had ever claimed this place. A crowd had gathered despite the cold. Humans on one side of the road, orcs on the other, with a careful space between them. Provincial guards stood at intervals, hands on sword hilts, watching for trouble. The other treaty couples were there too, 4 other grim-faced young men in their best clothes, 4 orc women whose faces Callum could not see beneath their veils, and the mirror image. 5 young orc men and 5 human women in white. The priest who would perform the ceremony was human. The priestess who would bless it was orc. They stood together at the center of the crossroads, and if they were uncomfortable with the arrangement, they hid it well. Callum stood in his place, his heart hammering against his ribs. He was vaguely aware of his parents behind him, of the weight of dozens of eyes. The wind cut through his jacket, or perhaps he was simply shaking. Then the orc brides began their approach. They came in a line, veiled in traditional red cloth that covered them from head to waist. Callum could make out shapes: broad shoulders, strong builds, the distinctive posture of orc women. His eyes tracked along the line, trying to guess which one was Worgana. The tallest, the one who walked with a slight limp, the one whose hands were clenched into fists at her sides. He found out when the brides reached their designated spots. The priestess called names, and one by one the women stepped forward to stand beside their assigned husbands. When she called Worgana, daughter of Grakhin, the last figure in line moved. She was smaller than he expected. Not small, she was still taller than him by half a hand, and he could see the strength in her shoulders even through the veil and the ceremonial robe. But smaller than her mother, smaller than the other brides. She took her place beside him, and he caught the faint scent of pine smoke and leather. The ceremony began. The priest spoke in human tongue about duty and peace and the future. The priestess spoke in Orcish, her words rolling and guttural and impossible for Callum to understand, though he caught what might have been prayers. They spoke of binding and blood, of two peoples becoming one through union. It felt like being buried alive. Then came the moment of unveiling. The tradition was simple. The grooms would lift their brides' veils, and the first kiss of greeting would seal the bond. Callum's hands felt numb as he reached for the red cloth. Beside him, the other grooms were doing the same. He heard a gasp from someone down the line, whether from a groom seeing his bride's face for the first time or from the crowd, he could not tell. His fingers found the edge of Worgana's veil. He hesitated, some instinct making him look up first, trying to see through the red cloth to the eyes he knew must be watching him. Then he lifted it. The first thing he noticed was her eyes. They were golden, the color of honey held up to sunlight, and they were fixed on him with an intensity that made his breath catch. Her skin was the deep green of summer leaves, darker than her father's, and her tusks were small and neat, barely protruding past her lower lip. Her hair was black and had been braided elaborately, woven through with red cords that matched her veil. She was beautiful. The thought struck him like a physical blow, surprising him so completely that he almost dropped the veil. He had not expected that. Had not allowed himself to think about what she might look like beyond the basic reality of her being an orc. But she was beautiful, fierce, and proud and terrified, he realized. Her golden eyes were wide, and he could see her jaw clenched tight, as if she was bracing herself for disgust or cruelty. All around them, the ceremony continued. He heard the priest's voice as if from a great distance, instructing the grooms to greet their brides. Someone in the crowd muttered something ugly. One of the other grooms had turned pale and looked as if he might be sick. Callum did not think. He simply smiled. It was not a large smile, not the broad grin he might have given a friend or the polite expression he would use with a merchant. It was small and real, a smile of relief and unexpected recognition. As if to say, "You are afraid too. At least we are not alone in this." Worgana's eyes widened. Her whole body went rigid with shock. Then, so quietly that only he could hear it, she made a sound that might have been a sob or a laugh. He could not tell which. The priest was talking about the kiss of greeting. Callum realized he was supposed to kiss her, this stranger who was now his wife, in front of all these people. The thought made his stomach twist. "Do we have to?" he murmured, pitching his voice low so only she could hear. "What?" Her voice was rougher than he expected, accented but clear. "The kiss, do we have to, or can we just?" He gestured vaguely. "Pretend." Something shifted in her expression. The terror receded slightly, replaced by confusion. "You do not want to?" "I do not want to make you uncomfortable," he said. "This is all uncomfortable enough." For a long moment, she just stared at him. Then she leaned down slightly. She was taller than him, after all, and pressed her lips briefly to his cheek. It was chaste and quick, nothing like the passionate embraces some of the other couples were attempting with varying degrees of awkwardness. "There," she said. "It is done." The crowd's response was mixed. Some cheered, some jeered. Most just watched with the wary tension of people waiting for violence, but the ceremony was complete. They were married now, bound by treaty and law and the blood-signed contracts. Callum and Worgana, human and orc, husband and wife. They had to remain at the crossroads for the wedding feast, another requirement of the treaty. Long tables had been set up, and food was brought out, an awkward mixture of human and orc dishes. The couples were seated together at one table while their families and the crowd arranged themselves at others. The divide remained absolute. Humans on one side, orcs on the other, and the newlyweds stuck in the middle. Callum sat beside Worgana in silence. She had drawn the veil back over her head, though it was no longer required. Her hands rested on the table, and he noticed she was gripping the wood hard enough that her knuckles had paled to a lighter green. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "That is a foolish question," she replied. "Fair enough." He looked down at his plate at the roasted meat and bread he had no appetite for. "I'm Callum. I mean, you probably know that, but we were not properly introduced before all this." "I know who you are." Her tone was flat. "The human boy my father sold me to for peace." The bitterness in her voice was sharp enough to cut. Callum winced. "If it helps, I did not get a choice either." "It does not help." They sat in silence after that. Around them, the feast continued its uncomfortable progress. Guards watched from all sides. Callum noticed that none of the other couples seemed to be having much better luck at conversation. One of the human grooms was drinking steadily, his orc bride sitting as far from him as the bench allowed. One of the orc grooms had his head in his hands while his human bride cried silently into her napkin. Only one couple seemed to be actually talking, an older human man with gray in his beard, and an orc woman who appeared to be around the same age. They were having some sort of halting conversation involving a lot of hand gestures and what looked like attempts at translation. It was painfully awkward, but at least they were trying. Callum felt a stab of guilt. He should try harder. This woman Worgana, she had lost as much as he had. More, maybe. He had heard stories about how orc clans treated those who were too friendly with humans. "What happens now?" he asked. "After the feast, I mean, do you come to live with me? Do I go with you? The treaty officials never explained that part." Worgana turned to look at him, and he could see her eyes through the thin red veil. "You truly do not know?" "No one told me anything except the date and time of the wedding." She made a sound that might have been a bitter laugh. "The treaty says we must establish a shared household. Neutral ground within 1 week of the wedding. We are to live together as proof of the union, to be inspected by officials from both sides to ensure we are honoring the agreement." "Inspected," Callum repeated. The word made him feel ill. "What does that mean exactly?" "I do not know." Worgana's voice dropped lower. "My mother said we must produce evidence of a true marriage. I did not ask what that meant." The implication hung between them, heavy and uncomfortable. Callum felt heat rise in his face. "That is not going to happen," he said firmly. "I mean, not unless I would never," he stumbled over the words, trying to find the right ones. "You are my wife-in-law, but that does not give me any rights over you. I will not force anything." Worgana was staring at him again with that same expression of confused shock from earlier. "You are very strange," she said finally. "I get that a lot. Human men are supposed to be." She trailed off, then shook her head. "Never mind, it does not matter what I was told." "What were you told?" Callum asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. "That humans are cruel. That they see us as animals. That I should expect to be treated as property at best and prey at worst." She said it matter-of-factly, as if reciting lessons learned by rote. "My father said to endure. My mother said to be strong. My brother said to kill you in your sleep if you tried to hurt me." Callum's blood ran cold. "Your brother gave you that advice at your wedding. He gave me the knife too." Worgana shifted slightly, and Callum caught a glimpse of a blade strapped to her thigh beneath the ceremonial robes. "I am not helpless, human. Even if you are stronger than you look, I could gut you before you laid a hand on me." She said it conversationally, almost pleasantly, but Callum did not doubt she meant every word. "Good," he said, and meant it. "I am glad you can defend yourself, but I hope you never have to. Not from me. Worgana tilted her head, studying him. Why did you smile? She asked abruptly. What, when you lifted my veil? Everyone else looked disgusted or afraid or resigned, but you smiled. Why? Callum thought about it, trying to find words for the impulse that had moved through him in that moment. Because you looked terrified, he said finally. And I realized I was not the only one who did not want this. It made me feel less alone. I suppose I smiled because we are trapped in this together, and that seems better than being trapped alone. Worgana did not respond for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than before. That is the strangest reason I have ever heard. I am starting to think strange might be my defining characteristic. Perhaps, she paused. My father has a hunting cabin near the border. It has been empty since my oldest brother died in the war. We could use that as our shared household. It is neutral enough, halfway between the human settlements and my clan's territory. That would work, Callum said. I can bring supplies, tools, whatever we need to make it livable. I can hunt, Worgana offered, and I know which plants are safe to eat in the deep forest. Between us we might manage not to starve. It was not much of a plan, but it was more than Callum had an hour ago. When do we leave? Tomorrow morning, Worgana said. The sooner we establish the household, the sooner the inspections begin. And the sooner they are satisfied, the sooner they will leave us alone. Leave us alone to what? Callum asked. Worgana's golden eyes met his through the veil. To figure out how to survive this, I suppose. The feast ended at dusk. The treaty demanded that the couples spend their wedding night in provided tents at the crossroads, another symbolic gesture meant to show the unity of the two peoples. In practice, it meant a cold night in canvas shelters while guards watched from outside and both crowds dispersed to their respective territories. Callum and Worgana stood outside their assigned tent as the last of the wedding guests departed. His parents had said their farewells earlier, his mother crying, his father gripping his shoulder hard enough to bruise. Marcus had simply nodded once, a gesture of solidarity or resignation or both. From the orc side, he had watched Warchief Graken embrace Worgana briefly, whispering something in her ear that made her stiffen. Her mother had touched her face gently, a gesture so tender it had made Callum look away. Her brother, a tall orc with a scarred jaw and angry eyes, had glared at Callum with open hostility before stalking away. Now they were alone, standing in the growing darkness with a tent and a marriage and no idea what came next. I will sleep outside, Callum said. You should have the tent. Do not be stupid, Worgana replied. It is freezing and there is only one bedroll. We are both adults. We can manage to share space for one night without drama. She had a point, but Callum still felt awkward as he followed her into the tent. It was larger than he expected, with a small brazier providing heat and light, a single thick bedroll, and their packs in the corner where officials had placed them earlier. Worgana removed her veil finally, then began the process of unpinning her elaborate braids. Callum busied himself with checking their supplies, trying not to watch her as she worked the red cords free from her hair. You can look, she said, amusement coloring her tone. You have already seen my face. I did not want to be rude. You are very concerned with rudeness for someone who has been forced into marriage with a monster. Callum turned to face her. You are not a monster. Tell that to your people. Worgana finished with her hair and shook it out. It fell past her shoulders in thick waves. Tell that to the humans I saw at the feast who looked at us like we were beasts in human clothing. Some of the orcs looked at me the same way, Callum pointed out. Your brother looked like he wanted to tear out my throat. He did. He does. Worgana sat down on the bedroll with a sigh. Roger hates all humans. He lost his mate in a raid 5 years ago. She was pregnant with their first child. The information hit Callum like a fist to the gut. "I am sorry. I did not know. Why would you? Humans do not care about orc losses." She said it without particular heat, just weary acceptance. "Just as orcs do not care about human losses. We have been killing each other for so long that the grief has become normal, expected. That is bleak. That is truth." Worgana looked up at him, her golden eyes catching the brazier light. "What did your family lose in the war?" Callum sat down on the other side of the bedroll, keeping a careful distance between them. "Two brothers, Samuel and Thomas. Samuel died in the fighting at Crow Ridge. Thomas died of infected wounds 6 months later. My brother Marcus lost his arm and most of his peace of mind." "And yet you smile at orc brides," Worgana said. "Would hatred bring them back?" "No, but it might feel better than nothing." Callum considered that. Marcus said something similar. "But I do not think feeling better through hatred is really feeling better at all. It is just turning one kind of pain into another." Worgana pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. The gesture made her look younger, less like a warrior and more like a frightened girl. "How old are you, Callum Strickland?" 23. "You?" 20. "Too young to be doing this," my mother said, "but I am all my father has left to trade. My sister died in the same raid that killed Roger's mate. My older brother died 2 winters ago from sickness that swept through the clan. I am the youngest, the last daughter, the only one left to sacrifice for peace." "We are quite the pair," Callum said softly. "Both of us leftovers, both of us traded away. At least you are not angry about it." "I was angry," Callum admitted. "I am still angry. But I am also tired, and I am also scared, and I am also sitting in a tent with someone who did not choose this either. Staying angry at you seems like a waste of energy we both need for more important things. Such as surviving, building this household, figuring out how to live through whatever comes next." Worgana rested her chin on her knees. "You are very practical. I am a farmer. Practical is what we do." She almost smiled at that, he thought. It was hard to tell in the dim light. "I suppose I should sleep," she said. "Tomorrow will be difficult." "Agreed." Callum looked at the single bedroll. "I really can sleep on the ground. And I really will not let you freeze to death on our wedding night. That would be poor form." Worgana lay down on the far edge of the bedroll, leaving space between them. "We are adults. We can sleep back to back without incident." Callum hesitated, then lay down on his side of the bedroll, his back to hers. The space between them felt vast and charged at the same time. He could feel her warmth, smell the pine smoke scent he had noticed earlier. "Callum." Her voice came out of the darkness. "Yes, thank you for smiling. Even if it was strange, it was better than the alternative." "You are welcome," he said softly. They did not speak again that night. Callum lay awake for a long time, listening to Worgana's breathing gradually even out into sleep. When he finally drifted off himself, his last thought was that tomorrow they would begin trying to build something from the wreckage of this forced union. It seemed impossible. But then again, so had getting through today, and somehow they had managed that. Morning came cold and gray. Callum woke to find Worgana already up, repacking her belongings with efficient movements. She had changed out of the ceremonial robes into practical traveling clothes, leather pants, a wool tunic, and a heavy cloak. With her hair braided back and a pack on her shoulders, she looked like exactly what she probably was, a warrior and hunter of her clan. "We should leave soon," she said when she noticed him stirring. "The cabin is half a day's walk from here. If we start now, we can arrive before dark." Callum nodded and set about gathering his own things. His pack was heavy with supplies his mother had insisted on including: preserved foods, a good axe, rope, extra blankets, and a dozen other items meant to help him survive. It felt like carrying a piece of home on his back. They left the tent and found the crossroads nearly deserted. Only a few guards remained, and they watched impassively as Callum and Worgana set off down the eastern road. No one said goodbye. No one wished them well. The walk was quiet at first. The road was well maintained this close to the crossroads, but as they traveled it gradually narrowed to a trail, then to barely more than a path through the trees. Worgana led the way, her steps confident even as the terrain grew rougher. "You know this area well," Callum observed. "I grew up hunting these forests," Worgana said without turning around. "My father used to bring me and my siblings here when we were children. He said we needed to know every valley and stream in Iron Ridge territory if we were to defend it properly." "Did you always want to be a warrior?" "One is not the right word. It is what orc children become. We do not have the luxury of choosing softer paths." She glanced back at him. "What did you want to be? Before you were a farmer?" "I wanted to be a farmer," Callum said. "I like working with the land, watching things grow." "It is honest work. Is killing the land not honest? Is killing people?" Worgana stopped walking and turned to face him fully. "No," she said after a moment, "it is not. I hated every moment of the fighting. Every life I took felt like cutting away a piece of myself." She paused. "But it was that or let my people be destroyed." "I know," Callum said quietly. "My brothers felt the same way, I think. They never spoke about the fighting when they came home, but I could see it in their eyes." They resumed walking. The forest grew denser around them, the autumn leaves a canopy of gold and red overhead. Callum found himself watching Worgana as she moved, noticing the way she checked the trail constantly, how her hand occasionally went to the knife at her belt as if reassuring herself it was still there. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You can ask. I may not answer." "What did your father say to you last night, before we went to the tent?" Worgana's shoulders tensed. For a moment he thought she would not answer, then she sighed. "He said that I was to endure this marriage with dignity, that I was to be a credit to the clan even in exile, and that if the human mistreated me, I should kill him and face the consequences rather than live in shame." "That is quite the wedding blessing," Callum said, trying for lightness he did not feel. "My father is not a sentimental man. But he loves me in his way. He is trying to protect me the only way he knows how. By telling you to kill me. By telling me I have permission to defend myself, even if it means breaking the treaty." Worgana stopped at a fallen log and sat down. "We should rest for a moment." "You are not used to this pace." Callum sat beside her, grateful for the break. His legs were already aching from the unfamiliar terrain. "What did your mother say?" "She told me to remember who I am. To remember that I am Iron Ridge, no matter what name I must take now." Worgana pulled out a water skin and drank deeply before offering it to Callum. "She also said that sometimes strength looks like survival, that living through this could be its own form of victory." "Your mother sounds wise." "She is. She was a shaman before she married my father. She gave up her calling to be his mate and raise his children. I think she has regretted it sometimes, but she made her choice and lived with it." Worgana turned to look at him. "What about your parents? What did they say to you?" "My mother cried and told me she loved me. My father said it was for the best and not to make them regret their choice." Callum stared out at the forest. "I do not think I have forgiven him yet. Perhaps I never will. Perhaps forgiveness is not required. Perhaps simply living is enough." They sat in silence for a while, passing the water skin back and forth. A bird called somewhere in the trees, a lonely sound that echoed through the forest. "Why did you agree to this?" Callum asked. "You said you were the last one your father could trade, but could you not have run, hidden?" Worgana's laugh was bitter. "And where would I go? Beyond clan territory there are only human lands where I would be killed on sight. Within clan territory, I would bring dishonor to my family. And if I abandoned the treaty, another would have to take my place, probably a younger girl, someone with even less ability to protect herself. At least I can fight if I need to. At least I know what I am walking into. That is brave, Callum said. That is necessity. Do not confuse the two. The path grew steeper as they continued. They climbed through rocky terrain, crossed a stream swollen with autumn rain, and finally emerged into a clearing where a small cabin stood against the hillside. It was sturdy-looking, built from split logs and roofed with slate, with a stone chimney rising from one end. "This is it," Worgana said. "Home, I suppose, for however long this lasts." Callum studied the cabin. It was isolated, surrounded by forest on 3 sides and overlooking a small valley on the 4th. No neighbors for miles. No one to hear if something went wrong. The thought should have been frightening, but instead he felt a strange sense of relief. At least here they would be alone. Free from the watching eyes and judging whispers. "It is a good location," he said. "Defensible, close to water. We can work with this." Worgana pushed open the door, which hung slightly crooked on its hinges. Inside, the cabin was dim and dusty but intact. A single room with a stone fireplace, a rough wooden table and chairs, a sleeping platform built into one corner, and shelves along the walls. A ladder led up to a small loft. The windows were intact, though the oiled parchment covering them was yellowed with age. "It needs work," Worgana said, surveying the space with critical eyes. "But the bones are good. My brother built this place himself before he died. He was a skilled craftsman. We can clean it today, repair what needs repairing over the next few days," Callum said. He set down his pack and rolled his shoulders, working out the stiffness from the long walk. "If we are going to be inspected, we should at least make it look like we are trying." They spent the rest of the afternoon making the cabin livable. Callum cleared out the old ash from the fireplace and checked the chimney, while Worgana swept the floors and wiped down surfaces with cloths and water from the nearby stream. They found supplies left behind from when the cabin was last occupied: a few dishes, some basic tools, a store of firewood under a tarp outside that was still dry. As evening approached, Callum got a fire going while Worgana went to check some snares she said her brother had set up in the surrounding woods. She returned with 2 rabbits, which she skinned and cleaned with practiced efficiency. "You are good at that," Callum observed as she worked. "I have been doing it since I was a child. You learn quickly when you grow up hungry." She spitted the rabbits and set them over the fire to roast. "Can you cook?" "Basic things. Bread, stews, simple meals. My mother made sure we all knew how to feed ourselves before she let us leave home." "Then we will not starve. That is better than some marriages start with." They ate dinner sitting at the old table, tearing meat from the bones with their fingers. It was simple food, but after the long day it tasted better than anything Callum could remember eating at the wedding feast. "What happens tomorrow?" he asked. "Tomorrow we continue making this place livable. We gather more supplies, I hunt, you repair things." Worgana gestured around the cabin. "And we wait for the officials to come inspect us and declare us properly married." "How long do we have to wait?" "The treaty says the first inspection must occur within 2 weeks of the wedding. After that, they will come periodically to ensure we are maintaining the union." She said it with such distaste that Callum could not help but wince. That sounds invasive. That is the point. They want to make sure we cannot simply live separate lives and pretend to be married. Worgana pushed her plate away. "They will ask questions. They will look for evidence that we are truly living as husband and wife. We need to be prepared for that." "What kind of evidence?" Though Callum suspected he knew the answer. "The kind that proves we share a bed, the kind that proves the marriage has been consummated." Worgana met his eyes across the table, They will not be subtle about it. Callum felt his face heat. And if we tell them the truth, that we are married in name only, then they will declare the marriage invalid and the treaty broken, and everything our people have suffered will be for nothing. The war will begin again. Worgana's voice was flat. So we will not tell them the truth. We will tell them what they need to hear to be satisfied. You mean we will lie? Yes, unless you would prefer the alternative. Callum thought about his brother's graves, about the burned fields and empty houses throughout the valley, about 20 more years of bloodshed. No, he said quietly. I would not prefer the alternative. Then we lie. Worgana stood and began clearing the dishes, and we make it convincing enough that no one questions it. That night they lay down in the sleeping platform together, a careful space maintained between them. The cabin was warmer than the tent had been, but Callum still felt the awkwardness of sleeping next to someone he barely knew, someone who was technically his wife but felt more like a fellow prisoner. Callum, Worgana's voice came from the darkness. Yes, I am glad you are not cruel. It makes this easier. I am glad you are not cruel either, he replied. I have been cruel, Worgana said softly. In the war, I have done things I wish I could forget. Just because I am not cruel to you does not mean I am not capable of it. I think there is a difference between doing cruel things because you must and being a cruel person, Callum said. Perhaps. Or perhaps I am simply lying to myself to make sleep easier. If so, you are not alone in it. Good night, Worgana. Good night, husband. The word hung between them, strange and new and uncomfortable. But not, Callum thought as sleep began to take him, entirely without hope. The days fell into a rhythm. Mornings, Callum would wake early and check their stores, repair whatever in the cabin needed attention, or chop firewood for the coming winter. Worgana would go hunting, sometimes returning within hours with game, sometimes disappearing for most of the day to check distant snares or scout the surrounding territory. They worked well together, Callum discovered. She was competent and direct, never wasting words or motion. He tried to match her efficiency, and if he sometimes caught her watching him with a thoughtful expression as he planed boards or fixed the crooked door, he did not comment on it. On the third day, Callum was reinforcing the shutters when Worgana returned from hunting empty-handed but with news. I saw signs of a bear near the eastern ridge, she said. Old signs, but we should be careful. If it comes this direction, it could be dangerous. Should we set up some kind of warning system? Already done. I strung bells on the trail approaches. If anything large comes through, we will hear it. She paused. You trust me to protect this place. It was not quite a question. Of course, Callum said. You know this land better than I do, and you are clearly better with weapons than I am. You do not mind that. Many human men would be insulted to have their wives provide the defense. Then many human men are fools. Callum set down his hammer. You are skilled at what you do. Why would I mind that? It makes both of us safer. Worgana made a contemplative noise and went inside. Callum returned to his work, wondering what he had said to earn that particular reaction. That evening, as they prepared dinner, Worgana asked him about his family's farm. What was it like, growing up there? Callum considered as he stirred the pot of stew they were making from venison and root vegetables. Peaceful, mostly. Hard work, but good work. We had 30 acres of grain fields, a vegetable garden and orchard, some chickens and pigs. My father ran it with my brothers, and I helped where I could. When I was young, I thought it was boring. I wanted adventure, travel, all the things young boys want. But not anymore. Not anymore, he agreed. The war showed me plenty of adventure. I learned that I prefer peace, even the boring kind. What will happen to the farm now that you are gone? Marcus will run it with my father, or my father will sell it when he cannot work anymore. I doubt I will ever see it again. The thought hurt less than he expected. Perhaps he had already mourned that loss. Do you miss it? Worgana asked. Sometimes, but missing it does not change anything. He ladled stew into bowls and handed her one. What about you? What was your life like before this? Worgana settled at the table, cradling her bowl. Training, mostly. Learning to fight, to hunt, to survive. Orc children do not have time for play. We have to grow up fast, or we do not grow up at all. She paused. But there were good moments, too. My sister and I used to sneak away from training to swim in the river on hot days. My mother taught me about herbs and healing when my father was not watching. And once, when I was very small, my father took me to the top of the highest peak in our territory and showed me all the lands the Iron Ridge clan protected. He told me that every stone and tree was my responsibility. That being strong meant protecting those who could not protect themselves. He sounds like a good father despite everything. He is doing what he thinks is right. I cannot fault him for that, even if I hate the result. Worgana ate in silence for a moment. Do you think we are doing the right thing, lying to the inspectors? I think we are doing the necessary thing, Callum said. Whether it is right or not almost does not matter. But it matters to you, I can tell. You are not comfortable with deception. She was right, though Callum did not particularly want to admit it. No, he said finally, I am not. But I am even less comfortable with the alternative. So I will lie, and I will feel guilty about it, and I will live with that guilt because it is still better than more death. You think too much, Worgana said, but there was no judgment in her voice. That will make you unhappy. I am already unhappy. At least thinking about it gives me something to do with the feeling. To his surprise, Worgana laughed a real laugh, warm and unexpected. You are very strange, Callum Strickland, but I am starting to think that strange might not be such a bad thing. The first inspection came on the 10th day. Callum was outside splitting wood when he heard the sound of approaching horses. He set down the axe and called to Worgana, who emerged from the cabin with her bow already in hand. Officials, he asked, likely, or trouble? She did not lower the bow until the riders came into view, 4 of them, 2 human and 2 orc, all wearing the badges of treaty enforcement. The lead human, a stern-faced woman with gray hair, dismounted and approached. Callum Strickland and Worgana, daughter of Graken. We are here to conduct the first inspection of your household as required by treaty law. Of course, Callum said, forcing his voice to remain steady. Please, come inside. The inspection was as invasive as Worgana had warned. The officials examined every inch of the cabin, asking pointed questions about their daily routines, their sleeping arrangements, their relationship. The orc inspector, a scarred warrior who looked deeply uncomfortable with his assignment, spent a long time studying the sleeping platform, checking for signs that it was used by 2 people. You share this bed? He asked in heavily accented human speech. Yes, Worgana said firmly. Where else would we sleep? The human woman inspector pulled her aside for a private conversation that Callum was not allowed to hear. Whatever was said, Worgana's face remained neutral throughout, though he saw her hands clench into fists at her sides. When the inspectors finally regrouped, the gray-haired woman addressed them both. The household appears to be in order. You are cohabitating in a manner consistent with marriage. However, we will need to ask some more specific questions regarding the consummation of the union. Callum felt his stomach drop. Beside him, Worgana went very still. The marriage has been consummated, Callum said, trying to sound confident. Is there anything else you need to know? The woman's eyes narrowed. When? The 3rd night we were here, Worgana said smoothly. Is that acceptable to you? There were no injuries or complaints. None, Worgana said. Her voice was cold. My husband has been respectful and appropriate. I have no complaints to lodge." The woman studied them both for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Very well, this inspection is complete. We will return in 1 month to conduct a follow-up examination. Continue to maintain the household in good order." They left as efficiently as they had arrived. Callum and Worgana stood outside the cabin, watching the riders disappear back down the trail. "That was humiliating," Worgana said once they were alone. "Yes," Callum agreed. "I am sorry you had to go through it. You went through it too, not the same way. That woman took you aside specifically. What did she ask you?" Worgana's jaw tightened. "Things that are none of her business. Whether you had hurt me, whether I had been forced, whether I was with child yet." She spat the last words like they tasted foul. "As if my body is public property to be inspected and judged." "I am sorry," Callum said again, not knowing what else to offer. "Stop apologizing for things that are not your fault." Worgana turned to go back inside, then stopped. "She also asked if I was happy. I did not know how to answer that." "What did you say?" "I said happiness was not part of the treaty requirements." She looked back at him. "But she asked if you had been cruel, and I could answer that honestly. I told her you had been kind. That seemed to satisfy her more than anything else." Callum did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing. They went inside and resumed their daily routines, but something had shifted. The inspection had made the lie they were living more concrete, more real. They were not just two people sharing space anymore. They were actively deceiving their peoples, building a facade of marriage to maintain a fragile peace. That night, lying in the darkness, Callum spoke into the silence. "If you ever do want to be happy, I would not mind that." "What?" Worgana sounded confused. "You said happiness was not part of the treaty, but it does not have to be forbidden either. If we are going to be stuck here together, we might as well not be miserable." "That is optimistic." "That is all I have left," Callum admitted. Worgana was quiet for so long he thought she had fallen asleep. Then she said very softly, "I will think about it." It was not agreement, but it was not refusal either. Callum took it as the small victory it was. Winter arrived early that year. Snow began falling in the middle of the 2nd month, transforming the forest into a landscape of white and gray. Callum and Worgana adapted, insulating the cabin as best they could, stocking up on preserved foods and firewood, settling in for the long cold months ahead. The isolation was absolute. No one visited except for the monthly inspections, which became routine exercises in practice deception. Callum and Worgana grew skilled at presenting the appearance of a married couple, learning each other's rhythms and tells well enough to lie convincingly about their relationship. But something else was happening too, something neither of them spoke about directly. They were becoming friends. It started small. Worgana teaching Callum to track animals in the snow, Callum teaching Worgana to bake bread in the cabin's small oven. Shared meals became shared conversations. Long silences became comfortable rather than awkward. Callum learned that Worgana loved thunderstorms and hated the taste of fish. Worgana learned that Callum sang quietly to himself while he worked and had a talent for carving small figures from wood. "What is that supposed to be?" she asked one evening, watching him work on a piece of pine, a rabbit, or possibly a very deformed dog. "I have not decided yet. It looks like neither." "Your criticism is noted and ignored." He turned the carving, considering it. "I used to make these for my nieces and nephews before the war." "You have nieces and nephews." "2 nephews, Marcus's boys. They were 5 and 7 when I left. I suppose they will be older now. Children grow fast." He set down the carving. "Do you have any nieces or nephews?" "No. My sister died before she could have children, and my brothers never lived long enough to become fathers." Worgana drew her knees up to her chest, A gesture Callum had learned meant she was thinking about painful things. The war took that from us. An entire generation of children who will never be born because their parents are dead. That is what war does. It steals futures. Yes, she was quiet for a moment. If things were different, would you have wanted children? The question caught Callum off guard. I do not know. I never thought about it much. It seemed like something far in the future after I had figured out my own life. Now that future is gone, so I suppose it does not matter. It might matter someday, perhaps. But today I am more concerned with making sure we have enough firewood to last until spring. It was Worgana's turn to almost smile, practical as always. Someone has to be. The second inspection came and went, then the third. Winter deepened, and the world outside the cabin became a frozen wilderness. They were trapped together by weather as much as treaty, and Callum found he did not mind as much as he once would have. One night, a storm hit with unusual ferocity. Wind howled around the cabin, driving snow through every crack and gap in the walls. The fire roared in the hearth, but the cold still seeped in. Callum woke in the middle of the night to find Worgana shivering violently beside him. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Fine," she said through chattering teeth. "You are freezing. Orcs run cold in winter. It is normal." "It is not normal if you are shaking like that." Callum made a decision. "Come here." "What?" "Body heat. We will stay warmer together than apart." When she hesitated, he added, "It is practical, that is all." Slowly, Worgana moved closer. Callum wrapped his arms around her, pulling her against his chest. She was indeed freezing, her skin like ice through her clothing. But gradually, shared warmth began to build between them. "Better?" he asked after a few minutes. "Yes," she admitted. "Thank you." They lay like that as the storm raged outside. Callum was acutely aware of every point of contact between them, her back against his chest, her hair tickling his chin, the slow rhythm of her breathing. It was intimate in a way their previous careful distance had never been. "Callum," her voice was soft. "Yes, why are you being so kind to me?" "Why would I not be? Because I am an orc, because our peoples have been enemies, because you were forced into this marriage against your will." She paused. "Because it would be easier to be cruel or indifferent." "Easier for whom?" Callum asked. "Not for me. Being cruel takes energy I would rather spend on other things, and being indifferent to someone I live with every day seems impossible. Most humans would find a way." "Then I suppose I am not most humans." Worgana was silent for a long time. Then she said, "I have been cruel to you in my thoughts. In the beginning, I resented you for existing, for being the face of my captivity. I did not see you as a person, just as a symbol of everything I had lost." "And now?" Callum asked carefully. "Now I see a person who sings while he works and carves terrible animal figures and shares his warmth without being asked. Now I see someone who is as trapped as I am but refuses to make his trap into my prison." She shifted slightly in his arms. "I am sorry for resenting you. You had every right to resent me, perhaps, but I do not want to anymore. It is exhausting." Callum tightened his arms around her slightly. "Then do not. We can be tired of hating together." Outside, the storm continued its fury. Inside, wrapped in shared warmth and tentative understanding, two people who should have been enemies found something that felt remarkably like peace. Spring came slowly, the snow melting to reveal mud and early shoots of green. Worgana began ranging farther from the cabin, hunting fresh game and scouting the awakening forest. Callum started a garden plot, turning over the earth and planting seeds he had saved through the winter. They worked side by side more often now, the careful distance of the early months replaced by comfortable proximity. Callum no longer thought twice about reaching around Worgana to grab a tool. Worgana no longer stiffened when Callum's hand accidentally brushed hers. The fourth inspection came on the first warm day of spring. The same officials arrived, asked the same questions, poked through their belongings with the same invasive thoroughness. But this time, when the gray-haired woman asked if the marriage was being properly maintained, Callum did not have to work quite so hard to make the lie sound convincing. "Yes," he said, "everything is fine. More than fine," Worgana added. "We are managing well." The woman studied them both. "You seem more comfortable with each other than during previous inspections." 6 months of living together will do that," Callum said. "Indeed." The woman made a note on her paper. "The Treaty Council will be pleased to hear the marriage is progressing satisfactorily." After the officials left, Worgana turned to Callum with a wry expression. "Progressing satisfactorily, as if we are a crop to be monitored for growth. At least we are growing in the right direction, apparently." "Are we?" Worgana asked. The question seemed to carry more weight than the words alone suggested. Callum thought about it. Thought about the months they had spent together, the slow accumulation of small moments and shared silences. Thought about how he no longer dreaded waking up each morning, how he had started to look forward to Worgana's return from hunting, how her rare smiles had become something he found himself trying to earn. "Yes," he said finally, "I think we are." Worgana held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded, just once, and went back inside the cabin. But that night, when they lay down to sleep, she did not maintain the careful distance they had once preserved. She settled close to him, her back to his chest in the position that had become normal after that winter storm and never quite reverted. "This is all right?" she asked quietly. "Yes," Callum said. "This is all right." He fell asleep with one arm draped over her waist and did not dream of his old life at all. The garden flourished. Callum spent his days tending the growing plants, building up the soil, constructing a fence to keep out deer and rabbits. Worgana helped where she could, though she admitted she knew far more about tracking animals than growing vegetables. "You are good at this," she observed one afternoon, watching him carefully thin a row of carrots. "It is what I was raised to do, coaxing life from the earth." Callum wiped sweat from his forehead. "There is something satisfying about it. You plant something small, care for it properly, and it becomes food. Simple cause and effect." "Not everything in life is so simple." "No," he agreed, "but this is. I appreciate that." Worgana knelt beside him, examining the neat rows of plants. "Teach me." "What?" "Teach me how to do this. I should know how to grow things, not just hunt them. It is a useful skill." So Callum taught her. He showed her how to tell which plants needed water and which were getting too much. How to identify the difference between a weed and a seedling. How to stake tomatoes and hill potatoes. Worgana learned quickly, her hands surprisingly gentle despite their calluses and scars. They worked together in the garden most days, and Callum found himself watching her more than he probably should. The way the sun caught in her dark hair, the focused expression she got when she was concentrating, the rare laugh she let out when she accidentally uprooted a carrot seedling instead of the weed beside it. "I am terrible at this," she said, holding up the limp seedling. "You are learning. That is different than being terrible." Callum took the seedling and tried to replant it, though he doubted it would survive. "Everyone kills plants when they are starting out. I once murdered an entire bed of lettuce by overwatering it. That makes me feel slightly better." "Good. Now try again with the next weed." By midsummer, the garden was producing more than they could eat themselves. Worgana suggested they preserve what they could for winter, so they spent long evenings pickling and drying and storing away food. It was domestic in a way that should have felt strange but somehow did not. "We have become quite the little household," Worgana said one night as they worked. "Is that bad? I do not know. It is just different from what I expected." She sealed a jar of pickled vegetables and added it to the growing line on the shelf. "When I agreed to this marriage, I thought I would spend my life in lonely endurance. I did not think I would end up learning to garden and preserve food with a human who makes terrible carvings. They are not that terrible. They are absolutely that terrible." But she was smiling as she said it. Callum felt something warm and complicated unfold in his chest. He recognized it, had been trying not to name it for weeks now. But sitting here in the cabin they had made into a home, watching Worgana smile at him in the lamplight, he could not deny it anymore. He was falling for her. Perhaps he had been falling for her since that winter storm. Perhaps even earlier, since the moment she had said, "This is all right," in the darkness, and trusted him enough to move closer. Whenever it had started, it was undeniable now. The realization should have terrified him. She was an orc. He was human. They were enemies by birth, united only by a treaty neither had chosen. Falling for her was complicated and potentially dangerous and absolutely not part of the plan. But hearts, Callum was learning, did not care much for plans. "What are you thinking about?" Worgana asked, noticing his silence. "Nothing important," he lied. "Just tired. We should sleep soon then. Tomorrow I want to check the snares on the eastern ridge." "I will come with you," Callum offered, "if you do not mind the company." Worgana looked surprised. "You want to come hunting with me? I want to spend the day with you. The hunting is just a bonus." She studied him for a long moment, something unreadable in her golden eyes. Then she nodded. "All right, we will go together." That night, Callum lay awake long after Worgana had fallen asleep beside him. He listened to her breathing, felt the warmth of her body against his, and tried to figure out what to do with this growing feeling in his chest. He could say nothing. Continue as they were, living this comfortable half-truth where they were married in law but not in heart. It would be safe. Simple. No risk of rejection or complication, but it would also be a lie, and Callum was tired of lies, even the necessary ones. He could tell her the truth. Admit that he had developed feelings for her that went beyond practical cohabitation. Risk changing the careful balance they had built. But what if she did not feel the same? What if his admission made her uncomfortable, made her pull away? They still had to live together, still had to maintain the appearance of a real marriage. Confessing his feelings could destroy the genuine friendship they had built. Callum sighed quietly. There were no easy answers. There never were when hearts got involved. In the end, he decided to wait. To watch. To see if maybe, possibly, Worgana might be feeling something similar, and if she was, then perhaps he would be brave enough to speak. The next morning they set out for the eastern ridge together. It was a clear day, the sky impossibly blue above the green canopy of summer leaves. Worgana moved through the forest like she was part of it, her steps silent and sure. Callum followed, trying to match her grace and failing but learning nonetheless. "There," Worgana said softly, pointing to a snare where a rabbit hung. "One, not much, but something." She reset the snare while Callum collected the rabbit. They continued on, checking each trap in sequence. Some were empty, some held game. It was quiet, peaceful work, and Callum found himself content just to be near her. "You are staring," Worgana said without looking at him. "Sorry." "I did not say stop." She glanced at him, and there was something in her expression he could not quite read. "Just warning you that I noticed. I will be more subtle." "I would prefer honest over subtle." Callum's heart stuttered. "Honest, if you are going to look at me, look at me. Do not pretend you are not." Worgana straightened from resetting a snare. "I have been looking at you too. It seems only fair that we are equally obvious about it. You have been looking at me. Do not sound so surprised. You are not difficult to look at." She said it matter-of-factly, as if commenting on the weather. For a human, that is quite the qualifier. Would you prefer I lie and say you are handsome for any species? But there was amusement in her voice. I would prefer you tell me what you mean when you say you have been looking at me, Callum said, his courage building. Worgana turned to face him fully. I mean that I have noticed things. The way you concentrate when you are working, the sound of your voice when you sing, the kindness in your eyes even when you are tired or frustrated. She paused. I mean that somewhere between being forced to marry you and learning to live with you, I stopped seeing you as my jailer and started seeing you as. She trailed off. As what? Callum prompted. I do not have words for it yet, Worgana admitted, but it is something more than I expected, more than I thought I was allowed to feel. Callum took a step closer to her. What if we allowed ourselves to feel it anyway? That seems dangerous. More dangerous than living in constant fear of the next inspection. More dangerous than pretending to be married to someone you hate. I do not hate you, Worgana said quietly. I have not hated you for a long time. I do not hate you either. Callum reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she did not, he touched her face gently, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. I think I might be feeling something very different from hate. Worgana's eyes widened. Callum, you do not have to say anything. I just wanted you to know, in case it matters. He started to pull his hand back, but she caught his wrist. It matters, she said. It matters more than I know how to explain. Then we do not have to explain it. We can just be with it, see where it goes. What if it goes nowhere? What if we are reading too much into survival and proximity? Then we will figure that out together. Callum stepped closer, close enough that he could feel her breath. But what if it is real? What if this thing between us is real? Then we are both fools, Worgana said. But she was leaning into his touch, her eyes fixed on his. I can live with being a fool if it means being a fool with you. Worgana made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Then she closed the distance between them and kissed him. It was nothing like the chaste peck she had given him at their wedding. This was real and hungry and full of months of repressed feeling. Callum kissed her back with everything he had, his arms wrapping around her, pulling her close. She was strong and warm and alive in his arms, and he felt like something inside him that had been locked tight was finally breaking open. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Worgana pressed her forehead against his. This is insane, she whispered. Probably, Callum agreed. We are supposed to be enemies. We were never very good at that. What will people say? Both are peoples. I do not care. And Callum realized he meant it. Let them say whatever they want. I am tired of living for other people's expectations. Worgana pulled back enough to look at him. Her golden eyes were bright with unshed tears. I am afraid, she admitted. Of what? That this will end badly, that we will hurt each other, that the world will find a way to destroy this before we have a chance to see what it becomes. Those are all valid fears, Callum said. But I am more afraid of never trying, of spending the rest of my life wondering what we could have been if we had been brave enough to reach for it. Worgana searched his face. Whatever she found there seemed to satisfy her. She nodded once, decisively. Then we try, we reach for it. Together. Together. They finished checking the snares in a daze, both of them moving through the motions while their minds processed what had just happened. When they returned to the cabin, laden with game and wild herbs Worgana had collected, everything looked the same, but everything felt different. That night, there was no careful distance. They lay wrapped around each other, talking in quiet voices about hopes and fears and the uncertain future they were choosing to build together. The inspectors will come again next month, Worgana said. They will ask their questions. And we will answer honestly for once, Callum replied, or honestly enough The marriage is real now, we have nothing to hide. They will not care that it took us months to get here. They will just be satisfied that their treaty is working. Then let them be satisfied. We can be satisfied too in our own way. Worgana traced idle patterns on his chest. My family will disown me if they find out I have actually fallen for a human. Your family will probably do the same. Then we will be disowned together. We will build our own family here. Just the two of us. For now, maybe not forever. If you wanted, Callum hesitated, suddenly unsure. I mean, we do not have to think about the future. We can just focus on now. I want to think about the future, Worgana said. For the first time since this began, I want there to be a future. With you. Callum kissed the top of her head. Then we will make one. Whatever that looks like. They fell asleep like that, tangled together, two people who had been forced into a marriage neither wanted and somehow found love anyway. Summer ripened into early autumn. The garden continued to produce. Worgana's hunting kept them well supplied with meat. They pickled and preserved and stored away food for the coming winter. But more than that, they lived. They learned each other in ways that went beyond the surface. Callum learned that Worgana loved music but was too self-conscious to sing. So he sang for her, simple folk songs and working tunes, until she started humming along. Worgana learned that Callum had nightmares sometimes about his brothers, so she held him when he woke gasping and waited patiently until he could speak again. They argued sometimes about the best way to preserve vegetables, about whether they needed more firewood, about 100 small domestic things. But even their arguments felt different now. There was no real heat in them, no underlying resentment. They were just two people figuring out how to share a life. The fifth inspection came in early autumn. The same officials, the same questions. But this time, when the gray-haired woman asked if the marriage was being properly maintained, both Callum and Worgana answered with more confidence than ever before. Yes, Callum said. Very much yes. The woman studied them both. You seem different, happier. We are, Worgana said simply. Is that a problem? Not at all. The treaty aims for peaceful unions. If happiness is a byproduct, so much the better. She made her notes. This may be the last regular inspection. The council is pleased with how all the treaty marriages are progressing. Barring complaints or concerns, we will check in annually instead of monthly. After the officials left, Callum and Worgana stood outside the cabin, processing the news. They are leaving us alone, Worgana said, sounding surprised. Apparently we are boring enough to be trustworthy, Callum replied. I never thought I would be grateful to be boring. We could celebrate, Callum suggested. I saved some of the mead from the wedding. We could drink it tonight. I have a better idea. Worgana took his hand. Let us go to the valley overlook. Watch the sunset. Enjoy the fact that we are finally free from constant scrutiny. They hiked to the overlook together, a spot where the trees opened up to reveal miles of rolling forest and distant mountains. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange and purple. Callum stood with Worgana beside him, their fingers intertwined, and felt something close to contentment. I did not think I would ever have this, he said quietly. This, peace, someone to share it with. A future that does not feel like a prison sentence. Worgana leaned her head against his shoulder. I did not either. I thought I would spend my life enduring. I never expected to actually live. We are doing better than living, Callum said. We are thriving. Do not be dramatic. I am not. Look around. We have a home. We have food. We have each other. That is thriving by any reasonable measure. Worgana was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I love you. The words hung in the air, enormous and vulnerable. Callum turned to face her, his heart racing. Say that again, he said. I love you, Worgana repeated. She looked terrified and determined all at once. I do not know when it happened exactly, maybe gradually over all these months. Maybe all at once in some moment I did not even notice, but I love you, Callum Strickland, and I needed you to know that. Callum cupped her face in his hands. I love you too. I have loved you for a while now, I think. I was just too scared to say it. And now I am still scared, but I am more afraid of not saying it than I am of what happens after I do. He kissed her softly. I love you, Worgana, my wife. My partner, my friend, I love you. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were crying. This is ridiculous, Worgana said, wiping at her eyes. We are warriors. We have survived war and loss and forced marriage. We should not be crying on a hillside at sunset like characters in a cheap romance. Why not? Callum asked. We have earned the right to be ridiculous. We have earned the right to cry happy tears and watch sunsets and say embarrassingly sincere things to each other. You make a compelling argument. I have my moments. They stayed on the overlook until the stars came out, talking about everything and nothing, making plans for the future, imagining what the next year might bring, the year after that. For the first time, the future felt like something to anticipate rather than endure. When they finally made their way back to the cabin in the darkness, Callum felt lighter than he had in years. The weight of duty and resentment and fear that had been crushing him since the day his father signed the marriage contract had finally lifted. He was free. They both were. Free to choose each other, to build the life they wanted rather than the one that had been forced on them. That night, their marriage became real in the final way it had not been before. There was no treaty obligation, no inspection to prepare for. Just two people who loved each other choosing to express that love in the most intimate way possible. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Worgana traced the line of Callum's jaw with her finger. No regrets, she asked. None, Callum said. You, not even one. They fell asleep in each other's arms, and Callum dreamed of gardens in bloom and a future full of possibilities. The first snow came early that year, just as it had the year before. But this winter was different. Where the previous winter had been about survival and slowly building trust, this one was about joy. They stayed close during the long, cold months, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Callum taught Worgana to read. She had learned some human script during the war, but never mastered it. She learned quickly, soon devouring the few books they had between them. Worgana taught Callum to fight properly. Not just the basic militia training he had received during the war, but real combat technique. She was patient and thorough, and Callum was a willing student even when he ended up on his back in the snow for the 10th time in a row. You are getting better, she said, offering him a hand up. You are a kind liar, Callum replied, accepting the help. I am serious. Your footwork has improved. You are thinking before you move now instead of just reacting. High praise from a master warrior. Worgana pulled him into a kiss. Flattery will get you everywhere. I certainly hope so. They celebrated the winter solstice together, combining human and orc traditions into something uniquely their own. Callum made sweet bread and mulled wine. Worgana carved protection symbols into the doorframe and lit candles in honor of her clan's ancestors. They exchanged gifts. Callum gave Worgana a carved figure of a wolf that was actually recognizable as a wolf, his skill having improved considerably. Worgana gave Callum a bow she had made herself, perfectly balanced for his size and strength. So I can actually help with the hunting, she explained. Instead of just following you around and scaring away game. I do not scare away that much game. You scare away all the game. That seems unfair. Life is unfair. At least now you can participate in the unfairness. The 6th inspection came in the middle of winter. The officials seemed surprised to find the cabin warm and well-maintained, the occupants healthy and obviously content. "You are doing well," the gray-haired woman observed. "Better than some of the other treaty couples." "How are the others doing?" Callum asked. He had not thought much about the other couples since the wedding, but suddenly he was curious. Mixed results. 2 of the marriages have dissolved despite treaty requirements. 3 are functioning but distant, the couples live as roommates rather than spouses. 4 are similar to yours, having found genuine companionship. The woman consulted her notes, and 1 couple is expecting a child in the spring. Callum and Worgana exchanged glances. A child. The result of a treaty marriage, half human and half orc. He wondered how the world would receive such a child. With acceptance, with hostility, with the same complicated mix of hope and suspicion that surrounded the marriages themselves. "What will happen to the marriages that dissolved?" Worgana asked. "Officially, nothing. The treaty does not allow for divorce, but it also does not specify enforcement mechanisms if couples choose to live separately. As long as they do not actively work against the peace, the Council has decided to allow them their distance." It was more lenient than Callum expected. Perhaps the architects of the treaty had recognized that forced cohabitation could only achieve so much. Hearts could not be legislated into love. After the officials left, Callum built up the fire while Worgana made tea. "A baby," she said quietly. "Can you imagine? Can you? I do not know. It seems complicated, a child of 2 worlds belonging fully to neither." She handed him a mug of tea. "Would you want that? A child?" Callum considered carefully. "Not now. We are still figuring out our own lives, but someday, maybe. If it was what we both wanted, not what the treaty demanded." "I feel the same," Worgana said. She sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "I want to have time with just us first, to be married without immediately becoming parents. Is that selfish?" "No, it is smart. Children should be wanted, planned for, not just results of obligation." "You are wise for someone so young. I am 24, you are 21, we are both young. Then we are both wise for our ages." Worgana sipped her tea. "Ask me again in a few years, about children, when we know each other better. When we are sure this is not just making the best of a bad situation." "It is not that," Callum said firmly. "This stopped being that months ago, I know, but I want to be absolutely certain before we bring new life into it." "That is fair." Callum set down his tea and pulled her close. "We have time. All the time we need." Winter gave way to spring again, their second spring together. Callum expanded the garden, building raised beds and planning crop rotations. Worgana cleared a section of forest to create a proper training ground, complete with targets for archery practice. They fell into the rhythm of their life with comfortable ease. Every day brought small joys, shared meals, evening conversations, the satisfaction of work well done. Every night brought the intimacy they had built together, a connection that felt deeper and more meaningful with time. The 7th inspection came and went with barely any conversation. The officials could see what was obvious. This was a successful marriage by any measure. The 8th inspection was even shorter. Then, on a warm day in late spring, a visitor arrived. Callum was working in the garden when he heard horses. He straightened, shading his eyes against the sun. Worgana emerged from the cabin, bow in hand, her posture alert, but these were not officials. The rider was a single orc, tall and scarred, with angry eyes that Callum recognized. "Roger," Worgana breathed. Her brother dismounted and approached slowly, his hands visible and empty of weapons, but the tension in his body suggested he was ready to fight at any moment. "Sister," he said in Orcish. Then in stilted human speech, "I need to speak with you. Alone." Anything you say to me, you can say in front of my husband, Worgana replied in human tongue. Roger's expression darkened. So it is true. You have actually bound yourself to this human, not just in law but in heart. Yes. Father sent me to check on you. He has heard rumors. He wanted to know if his daughter had betrayed her people. I have betrayed no one, Worgana said, her voice hard. I have honored the treaty. I have built a life. What more does he want from me? He wants to know that you have not forgotten who you are, that you have not become human yourself. I will never forget who I am, Worgana said. I am Ironridge, I am orc, but I am also in love with a human man, and I will not apologize for that. Roger's hands clenched into fists. He looked at Callum with pure hatred. You, what did you do to her? What magic or manipulation turned my sister into a traitor? I did nothing, Callum said, keeping his voice steady despite his racing heart. We were forced to marry. We decided to make the best of it. We fell in love. That is all. That is all. Roger took a step forward. You steal my sister's heart and act as if it is nothing. I did not steal anything. She gave it freely as I gave mine to her. Callum stood his ground. I love your sister. I will protect her and honor her for as long as I live. That is not betrayal. That is commitment. For a long moment, Callum thought Roger might attack him anyway. The orc warrior was easily 6.5 feet tall, built like a bear and clearly capable of tearing Callum apart with his bare hands. But Worgana stepped between them. Enough, she said. Roger, I love you. You are my brother, my blood, but you do not get to tell me how to live my life or who to love. I have made my choice. Your choice dooms you, Roger said. Our people will never accept this. They will see you as tainted, lost to them. Then I am lost, Worgana said, and there was heartbreak in her voice but also certainty. I would rather be lost and happy than found and miserable. Roger looked between them, his expression cycling through anger and pain and something that might have been grief. Finally, he shook his head. I cannot understand this, but I will not fight you on it. You are still my sister, even if you have chosen a path I cannot follow. He turned to Callum. You hurt her and I will come back, and no treaty will stop me from ending you. I will never hurt her, Callum said. You have my word. The word of a human means nothing to me, but the word of my sister does, and she has chosen you, so I must accept it. Roger moved to mount his horse, then paused. Father will not be pleased. You should prepare for that. I know, Worgana said softly. Thank you for coming, Roger. For warning me. He nodded once, then rode away without another word. After he disappeared down the trail, Worgana stood still for a long moment. Then she turned and walked into Callum's arms. That went better than I expected, she said into his shoulder. He threatened to kill me. But he did not try. For Roger, that is practically a blessing. She pulled back to look at him. Are you all right? I am fine. Are you all right? He is your brother, he is, and I love him, but I love you more. Worgana touched Callum's face gently. I chose you. I will keep choosing you, no matter who objects. Even your father, even him. Callum pulled her close again, his heart aching for what this cost her but also swelling with love for her certainty. They went inside together and said nothing more about Roger's visit that day. But Callum noticed that Worgana was quieter than usual that evening, her thoughts clearly far away. Penny for your thoughts, he said as they prepared for bed, just thinking about family, about how complicated it all is. Do you regret this, us? Never. She said it with such force that he had to believe her. But I am sad. I am sad that my family cannot see what I see, that they cannot be happy for me. Maybe someday they will, maybe, but I am not counting on it. Worgana climbed into bed and pulled him down beside her. Right now, you are my family. This place is my home. That is enough. It is enough for me too, Callum said. They fell asleep holding each other, and if Callum heard Worgana cry softly in the night, he said nothing. He just held her tighter and let her grieve in private. Summer arrived in full force. The garden exploded with growth, producing more than they could possibly eat. They gave away excess vegetables to the few neighbors who lived within reasonable distance, a human trapper to the west, an older orc couple to the south who had also been part of the treaty marriages. The older couple, Garrick and Helena, became unexpected friends. Garrick was an orc warrior retired due to age and injury. Helena was a human widow who had volunteered for the treaty marriage rather than grow old alone. They had bonded over shared grief and practical necessity, and while they claimed theirs was not a love match, they clearly cared for each other deeply. "You two remind me of us," Helena said one afternoon when she and Garrick had come to trade, smoked meat for fresh vegetables. "Or rather, what we might have been if we had started younger." "You and Garrick seem happy enough," Worgana observed. "We are content," Helena corrected. "Content is not the same as happy, but it is not nothing either. You two, though, you are actually in love. That is rare. Treasure it." "We do," Callum said, taking Worgana's hand. Garrick, who had been examining the garden with professional interest, turned to look at them. "Word of advice," he said in his rumbling voice. "The world will try to take this from you. People who hate the treaty, people who hate that the two of you found joy in it. Be ready to defend what you have built." "Are we in danger?" Callum asked. "Everyone is in danger all the time," Garrick said philosophically, "but you two more than most. Interspecies couples, even treaty-sanctioned ones, still face prejudice. Be careful who you trust outside this valley." It was sobering advice, but also practical. Callum and Worgana thanked them and promised to be cautious. After Helena and Garrick left, Worgana turned to Callum with a serious expression. "He is right, you know. We have been safe here in our isolation, but we cannot hide forever." "Do you want to leave?" Callum asked. "No, but I want to be prepared in case the leaving is not our choice. In case someone decides to make an example of us." "What do you suggest?" "We train, both of us together. We make sure we can defend this place and each other if we need to, and we stockpile supplies so we can disappear into the deep wilderness if we must." It was grim planning, but Callum could not argue with the logic. They spent the rest of summer preparing. Worgana taught Callum advanced combat techniques. They cached supplies at strategic locations in the forest. They established multiple escape routes from the cabin, but they also lived. They swam in the stream on hot afternoons. They made love in the tall grass of the meadow. They laughed and argued and cooked meals together and did all the small domestic things that made up a life. On the anniversary of their wedding, Callum made Worgana breakfast in bed, a clumsy affair that resulted in burned bread and undercooked eggs, but she ate it anyway and declared it the best meal she had ever had. "Liar," Callum said fondly. "I am many things, but I am not a liar when it comes to you." She pulled him down for a kiss. "Thank you for this year, for making a forced marriage into a real one." "Thank you for being brave enough to try," Callum replied. "A year ago I thought my life was ending. Now I cannot imagine being anywhere else or with anyone else." "That is the sappiest thing you have ever said." "I am feeling sappy. It is our anniversary." "Fair enough." Worgana set aside the breakfast tray and pulled him back into bed. "Then let us be sappy together." They spent the day together, just the two of them, celebrating the unlikely love they had found, and when night fell they lay tangled together and made promises for the future. "Another year," Callum said. "At least, maybe more." "All the years," Worgana corrected. "I want all of them with you." "You have them. Every single one." It was a promise neither of them could guarantee. They would keep. Life was too uncertain, the world too dangerous. But it was a promise they meant with every fiber of their beings, and for that moment in that place, it was enough. The second winter came and went much like the first, but with more ease and confidence. They had learned each other's rhythms, knew how to weather the long, cold months together. The inspections had dropped to twice yearly, then once. The officials seemed satisfied that this marriage, at least, was exactly what the treaty had hoped for. Spring came again, their third spring. Callum was 26 now, Worgana 23. They were no longer the frightened people who had been forced into marriage at a crossroads. They had grown together, built something real and lasting. One morning in early spring, Worgana woke feeling ill. Callum fretted over her, but she insisted it was nothing, just something she ate that disagreed with her. But when the same illness struck her every morning for a week, they both began to suspect the truth. "I could be wrong," Worgana said, her hand pressed to her flat stomach. "It might be nothing, or it might be something," Callum replied. He felt strange, excited, and terrified in equal measure. "Do you want it to be something? I do not know. I mean, we talked about waiting, about being sure, but if it is happening anyway." She looked up at him, her golden eyes uncertain. "Do you want this?" Callum knelt beside where she sat on the edge of the bed. "If you are pregnant, then yes." "I want this. I want a family with you, but only if you want it too." "I am scared," Worgana admitted. "Scared of what bringing a half-orc child into this world might mean. Scared that I will be a terrible mother. Scared that something will go wrong." "I am scared too," Callum said. "But I think that is normal, and we do not have to be scared alone. We will figure it out together, like we have figured out everything else." Worgana put her hand over his. "Together," she agreed. Helena confirmed the pregnancy a few weeks later. She had served as a midwife in her village and knew the signs well. "You are definitely with child," she said to Worgana. "About 2 months along, I would guess. You will start showing in another month or so." "Is it dangerous?" Callum asked. "Human and orc physiology are different." "Are there complications we should know about?" "There can be," Helena admitted. "But I have helped deliver 2 half-orc children from human mothers before. They were both healthy. Orc mothers carrying half-human children should have an easier time. If anything, orc women are built stronger." It was reassuring, if not entirely comforting. Worgana and Callum spent the next few weeks adjusting to the reality of impending parenthood. "We need to prepare the cabin," Worgana said. "Make space for a child, build a cradle, stock up on supplies." "We need to prepare ourselves," Callum added. "Figure out how to be parents when neither of us had particularly good examples." "My mother was a good example, before the war made her hard." Worgana touched her stomach, which was just beginning to swell. "I hope I can be like she used to be, fierce but kind." "You are already both those things," Callum said. They told Garrick and Helena first, then sent word to the treaty officials that the marriage had produced offspring, another checkmark in the treaty's success column. The officials seemed pleased and promised that any children of treaty marriages would be considered full citizens of both human and orc societies, protected under the peace accords. Callum wanted to tell his family, but he had no way to reach them without traveling back to his home valley, a journey Worgana was no longer up for in her condition. Instead, he wrote a letter and gave it to a traveling merchant to deliver, not knowing if it would ever arrive. Worgana sent word to her father through Roger. Her brother arrived a month later, his expression still stern but perhaps slightly less hostile than before. "Father says you dishonor the clan," he told Worgana bluntly. "But Mother says she wishes to meet her grandchild when the time comes." "She defies Father on this." "And you?" Worgana asked. "What do you say?" Roger looked at her, really looked at her, seeing the glow in her face and the protective hand she kept on her belly. "I say you are happy. I still do not understand it, but I can see it, so I will support you from a distance." "That is the best I can offer." "That is enough," Worgana said, tears in her eyes. "Thank you, brother." After Roger left, Worgana cried in Callum's arms, tears of relief and grief mixed together. "I thought I would lose them all," she whispered. "But maybe I still have my mother. Maybe I still have Roger in his way. Maybe this child will not be as alone as I feared." "This child will never be alone," Callum said fiercely. "They will have us. They will have love. That is more than many children get." Summer passed in a flurry of preparation. Callum built a cradle with his much improved woodworking skills. Worgana sewed blankets and tiny clothes, her hands surprisingly deft with needle and thread. Helena visited often, checking on Worgana's health and offering advice. "The child will likely have tusks," she warned. "Small ones like yours, but they will be there from birth. It can make nursing challenging at first. Be patient with yourself." Worgana was patient with herself, but not always with Callum. As her pregnancy progressed, her patience in general grew shorter. She snapped at him for things that would not have bothered her before, then immediately apologized, then got angry at herself for apologizing, then cried because she was angry. Callum weathered it all with as much grace as he could muster, reminding himself that she was growing a whole human, or half-human, inside her body, and that gave her the right to be as irritable as she wanted. "You are being too understanding," Worgana said one evening after she had yelled at him for breathing too loudly. "You should yell back." "Why would I yell at a pregnant woman?" "Because I am being unreasonable. You are growing a person. You are allowed to be unreasonable." "You are infuriating." "So you keep saying, 'I love you too.'" Despite her moods, or perhaps because he understood them, Callum fell even more in love with his wife during those months. He loved her strength, her vulnerability, her fierce determination to bring their child safely into the world. He loved the way she talked to her belly when she thought he was not listening, telling their unborn baby stories about the forest and the clan, and what they would teach them when they arrived. He loved watching her transform, her body changing to accommodate new life, and he felt privileged to witness it. The baby came in early autumn, on a day when the sky was clear, and the air smelled of turning leaves. Helena arrived at dawn when Callum sent Garrick to fetch her, finding Worgana pacing the cabin with a hand pressed to her lower back. "It is time," Helena asked. "It is time," Worgana confirmed through gritted teeth. What followed was the longest day of Callum's life. He had seen animals give birth on the farm, had helped with difficult deliveries, but nothing prepared him for watching Worgana in labor. She was strong and stoic, refusing to scream though he could see the agony in her eyes. Helena guided her through it with calm competence, and Callum did whatever he was told, fetching water, holding Worgana's hand, staying out of the way when necessary. Finally, as the sun began to set, a baby's cry split the air. "A daughter," Helena announced, wrapping the tiny squalling infant in a blanket. "Healthy lungs, all fingers and toes accounted for." She placed the baby in Worgana's arms, and Callum watched his wife's face transform with wonder. The baby was perfect. Small, with skin a lighter green than Worgana's but darker than human flesh, a soft mixture of both parents. Her eyes were closed, her tiny mouth open in crying protest. And yes, there were small tusks, barely visible bumps on her lower jaw. "She is beautiful," Callum breathed. "She is ours," Worgana said, tears streaming down her face. "Callum, she is ours." He sat beside them on the bed, wrapping his arms around both his wife and his daughter, and felt something in his chest expand so much it almost hurt. This was his family. His real family, built from nothing but choice and love and stubbornness. "What should we name her?" he asked. Worgana thought for a moment. "Willow. For the trees that bend but do not break, I want her to have that strength and flexibility." "Willow Strickland," Callum tested the name. "I like it." Willow Grace for my mother. Willow Grace Strickland, Worgana agreed. Welcome to the world, little one. We have been waiting for you. Baby Willow stopped crying and made a small snuffling sound as if in response. Helena left them alone after ensuring both mother and baby were healthy. Callum lay beside Worgana on the bed, watching as she nursed their daughter for the first time, awkward and painful at first, just as Helena had warned, but eventually successful. We made this, Worgana said, wonder still coloring her voice. We made a whole person. We did. She is perfect. She is going to face so much prejudice, so much hatred just for existing. Then we will teach her to be strong enough to face it, Callum said. We will give her so much love that the hatred cannot touch her core. We will show her that being different is not wrong, it is just different. And we will make sure she knows, every single day, that she is wanted and cherished. Worgana looked at him with so much love it made him ache. How did I get so lucky? To be forced to marry the one human in the world who would love me and our half-breed child so fiercely. I think we made our own luck, Callum said. We could have let the world make us bitter. Instead, we chose each other. That is not luck. That is choice. Then I choose you. Every day I choose you. And I choose you, both of you, for all the days I have left. They fell asleep like that, the three of them tangled together in the bed, a family born from a treaty but bound by something far stronger than any law or obligation. Weeks passed in a blur of sleepless nights and constant feedings, and the particular exhaustion that came with new parenthood. Willow was a surprisingly quiet baby, crying only when she needed something and settling quickly once her needs were met. She is orc, Worgana said proudly. Even as a baby, she knows not to make unnecessary noise. It is instinct. Or she is just an easy baby and we should count our blessings. That too. Helena visited often to check on them. Garrick came once, took one look at the tiny baby and declared her fierce enough to be Ironridge, no matter what her blood says. It was high praise from the old warrior. Callum wrote another letter to his family, this one announcing the birth. He had no idea if the first letter had ever reached them, but he sent this one anyway, including a carefully drawn sketch of Willow. The response came 2 months later, delivered by the same traveling merchant. A letter from his mother, written in her careful script, full of congratulations and blessings and regret that she could not meet her granddaughter. His father had added a single line at the bottom. You have done well. I am proud. It was not much, but it was something. Worgana received a visitor to her mother who arrived unannounced one morning with Roger as escort. I had to see her, Worgana's mother said, not bothering with pleasantries. My grandchild, let me see her. Worgana brought Willow out, now 3 months old and beginning to smile at faces. Her grandmother took one look at her and burst into tears. She has your eyes, she told Worgana, and your father's nose, and that stubborn set to her jaw that runs in our family. She touched Willow's tiny tusks gently. She is Ironridge, no matter what anyone says. The visit was short. Worgana's mother could not risk staying long without her husband finding out, but before she left, she pulled Worgana aside. You are happy, she said. It was not a question. I am, Worgana replied. Then I am glad. I worried that I sent my daughter into hell. But I see now that you found something else entirely. Hold on to it, daughter. Hold on to this happiness. It is rare and precious. After her mother left, Worgana cried for an hour, tears of relief and joy and grief for the years her mother would likely never get to spend with Willow. But she also smiled. My mother gave me her blessing, she said to Callum. Not my father, but my mother, that is enough. More than enough, Callum agreed. Willow grew fast. By 6 months she was crawling. By a year she was walking, her small legs unsteady but determined. She looked more human than orc. her tusks barely visible and her skin light enough that she might pass for human at a distance. But her strength was pure orc. She could climb and grab and pull with a power that surprised them both. "She is going to be a handful," Worgana said, watching Willow attempt to climb onto the table for the third time that afternoon. "She is going to be amazing," Callum corrected. "Look at her determination. She has your stubbornness and your optimism, a dangerous combination." They raised Willow with love and structure, teaching her both human and orc ways. Callum taught her the names of plants and how to care for the garden. Worgana taught her to move quietly through the forest and respect the animals they hunted. Together they taught her that she was not divided, she was whole, a perfect blend of two peoples who had learned to love each other. The world outside their valley continued to turn. The treaty held, though it was not without tensions. Some treaty marriages thrived, others failed. But the peace endured, fragile but real. Callum and Worgana lived their life in their cabin, raising their daughter, tending their land, and building something that looked remarkably like happiness. The inspections had stopped altogether after Willow's birth. Apparently a child was proof enough of the marriage's validity. They had freedom now. They could have left, could have tried to rejoin their respective peoples. But they chose to stay. This was their home. This was where they had found each other. This was where they wanted to build their future. On their 5th anniversary, Callum and Worgana stood on the valley overlook, watching the sunset while Willow played at their feet. 5 years, Worgana said. "I would have said it was impossible that first day, to not just survive but thrive." "We did more than thrive," Callum said. "We built a life, a real one, complete with a garden and a daughter and embarrassingly domestic happiness. You sound proud of yourself. I am proud of us. We took something forced and made it chosen. We took something that should have broken us and turned it into the foundation of a family." He pulled her close. "I would marry you again, you know, if I had the choice. Even with all the complications, all the prejudice and difficulty. Especially with all that, because you are worth it. This is worth it." Worgana kissed him soft and sweet. "Then I would marry you again too, without hesitation." Willow tugged on Callum's pant leg. "Papa, look." She held up a flower she had picked, offering it with a gap-toothed smile. Callum picked her up, settling her on his hip. "That is beautiful, Willow, just like your mother." "Just like both her parents," Worgana corrected. She wrapped her arm around Callum's waist and they stood there together, the three of them, watching the sun paint the sky in colors of fire and gold. It was not the life any of them had planned. It was not the life they would have chosen if choice had been offered from the beginning, but it was theirs. Built from ashes and forced beginnings and the stubborn determination to find hope in darkness. And as Callum looked at his wife and daughter, at the home they had made together, he could not imagine wanting anything different. Their families had forced the wedding. The treaty had bound them together, but they had chosen to love. And that choice, made over and over again every single day, had transformed everything. The sun set, painting their small family in golden light. And in that moment, in that place, they were exactly where they belonged. Years continued to flow like the seasons, each one adding new layers to their life. Willow grew from toddler to child, her personality emerging bright and curious. She asked endless questions about everything: why the sky was blue, why birds sang, why humans and orcs had fought for so long. Callum and Worgana answered as honestly as they could, never hiding the difficult truths but always framing them with hope. When Willow was 5, Worgana became pregnant again. This time there was no fear, only anticipation. They knew what to expect, knew they could handle whatever came. Their son was born in spring, a robust baby with more orcish features than his sister's darker green skin, more prominent tusks, and the broad build of his mother's people. They named him Samuel, for Callum's fallen brother with the orcish middle name Gregor, which meant strong heart in the Ironridge tongue. Willow adored her baby brother from the first moment, insisting on helping with everything. She would sit beside Worgana while Samuel nursed, telling him stories about the forest and the animals, preparing him for the adventures they would have together. "You are going to be a good older sister," Callum told her. "I am going to be the best," Willow declared with the absolute confidence of a 5-year-old, and she was. As Samuel grew, Willow protected him fiercely, teaching him to walk and climb and later to track animals through the forest. They were inseparable, a pair of half-orc children who belonged to both worlds and neither, making their own path. Callum and Worgana watched their children grow with pride and occasional terror, the terror that came with loving something so much it could destroy you to lose it. But they had learned to live with that fear, to acknowledge it without letting it control them. On their 10th anniversary, long after the children had been put to bed, Callum and Worgana sat outside the cabin under the stars. 10 years, Worgana said, her head resting on Callum's shoulder. A decade since we were forced to stand at that crossroads. Best worst thing that ever happened to us, Callum replied. What? Being forced to marry, it was terrible. It was also the thing that brought us together. So it is the best worst thing or the worst best thing. I have not decided which. Worgana laughed, that full warm laugh he had spent years learning to draw out of her. You are ridiculous. You love me anyway. I love you because of it, not despite it. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the forest. Inside the cabin, their children slept safe and warm. The garden was flourishing. The peace was holding. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had run? Callum asked. If you had refused the marriage and disappeared? Sometimes, Worgana admitted. But then I look at Willow and Samuel and I cannot imagine a world where they do not exist. So no, I do not wish I had run. I am glad I stayed. I am glad I met you. I am glad for all of it, even the hard parts. Even the inspections. Well, maybe not those. Those were humiliating. Fair enough. Worgana lifted her head to look at him. What about you? Do you wish things had been different? I wish we could have chosen each other from the start, Callum said honestly. I wish our peoples had not needed a war and a treaty to make this possible. But do I wish I had never married you? Never. Not for a single moment. Good answer. I try. They stayed outside until the night grew cold, then went inside together to check on their sleeping children before retiring to their own bed. As they lay tangled together in the darkness, Callum thought about how far they had come from those two frightened people at a crossroads. They had built a life. A real one. Full of love and work and children and hope. It was not perfect, nothing ever was, but it was theirs, and it was good. More years passed. Willow turned 10, then 12. Samuel followed his sister's footsteps, growing strong and bright and fierce. They learned both human and orc ways, spoke both languages fluently, and moved between both worlds with an ease their parents envied. The children met their extended family occasionally. Callum's mother visited once, traveling all the way to the cabin to meet her grandchildren. She cried when she held them, telling them stories about their father as a boy and promising to visit again soon. Worgana's mother came more frequently, always in secret, always bringing gifts and blessings. Roger came too sometimes, his hostility long since mellowed into grudging acceptance. He taught Willow and Samuel to fight in the orc way, grumbling about half-breed children but secretly proud of their progress. You have done well, Roger told Worgana during one visit, watching the children spar with wooden swords. They are strong. They will need to be, growing up between two worlds. They will be, Worgana said confidently. We are making sure of that. The valley became known as a safe place for interspecies couples. Several more mixed families settled nearby over the years, drawn by stories of Callum and Worgana's success. They formed a small community, these families who existed on the edges of both societies, supporting each other through the challenges that came with their choices. Callum and Worgana became informal leaders of this community, offering advice and help to newer couples still figuring out how to navigate their forced marriages. Some of those marriages never became more than pragmatic partnerships, and that was fine. But others bloomed into genuine love, and Callum and Worgana felt proud to have shown it was possible. On their 15th anniversary, their children now 12 and 10, Callum woke Worgana before dawn. "Come with me," he said. "I want to show you something." She followed him, sleepy and confused as he led her to the valley overlook. But instead of their usual viewing spot, he took her to a clearing just below it where a new structure stood. "What is this?" Worgana asked. "A workshop," Callum said. "For you. I know you have wanted space to work on your leatherwork and weapon making. I thought it was time you had a place of your own." Worgana walked into the small building, touching the workbenches Callum had built, the racks for storing tools and materials. Her eyes filled with tears. "You built this for me. I started months ago. The kids helped. We wanted to surprise you." Callum wrapped his arms around her from behind. "You have given me so much. I wanted to give you something back. You give me everything every day. Then this is extra." Worgana turned in his arms and kissed him deeply. "I love you. 15 years, and I love you more every single day, even when I leave my boots in the middle of the floor, even then, though I wish you would stop doing that. Old habits die hard." They stood in her new workshop, holding each other, and Callum felt the same overwhelming gratitude he had felt a decade ago on their 5th anniversary. They had built something lasting, something real, something that would outlive them in their children and the community they had helped create. More years passed. The children grew into teenagers, full of energy and questions and the particular challenges that came with adolescence. Willow developed an interest in healing, apprenticing herself to Helena. Samuel discovered a talent for diplomacy, serving as a translator and mediator between human and orc settlements. Callum and Worgana grew older too, their hair showing streaks of gray, their bodies bearing the marks of years of hard work. But they grew older together, and that made all the difference. On their 20th anniversary, they renewed their vows. Not because they were required to, not because of any treaty or obligation, but because they wanted to. They stood at the same crossroads where they had been married 2 decades earlier, surrounded by their children, their friends, and the mixed community they had helped build. This time, when Callum lifted Worgana's veil, she was already smiling. And when he smiled back, it was not the tentative smile of a frightened young man, but the full, joyful smile of someone who had found exactly where he belonged. "I would choose you," he said, the same words he had spoken on their 5th anniversary. "Every time, every life, every possible world. I would choose you." "And I would choose you," Worgana replied. "My husband, my partner, my love, now and always." They kissed, and their children cheered, and the sun set over the crossroads, painting the sky in colors of fire and gold. 20 years since they had been forced to stand in this spot as strangers. 20 years of building a life from nothing. 20 years of choosing each other over and over every single day. Their families had forced the wedding. But when the orc bride had lifted her veil, he had smiled first. And that smile, offered in a moment of genuine compassion and recognition, had changed everything. From that small beginning, one smile between two frightened people had grown a love that defied expectation and prejudice. A love that had produced children and community, and hope for a better future. As they walked away from the crossroads together, hands intertwined, surrounded by everyone they loved, Callum and Worgana knew they had succeeded in the thing that mattered most. They had transformed a forced marriage into a chosen love. They had taken the worst moment of their lives and turned it into the foundation of everything good that followed. And they had proven, beyond doubt or question, that love could bloom even in the most unlikely soil given enough patience, enough courage, and enough stubborn determination to keep choosing each other, no matter what the world said. Their story, which had begun with obligation and fear, ended with joy and fulfillment. Not a fairy tale ending because life was never that simple, but a real ending, full of love and family and the deep satisfaction of a life well lived together. As the sun set on their 20th anniversary, Callum and Worgana walked home to the cabin they had built together, their children beside them, their love as strong as it had ever been. And they knew, without question, that they would keep choosing each other for all the years they had left. Because that was what love meant, not the grand gestures or perfect moments, but the daily choice to stay, to grow, to build something beautiful from whatever materials life provided. They had been given a forced wedding, but they had created a true marriage, and that made all the difference.